one thing is very interesting in your latest book, again, on the implications of technology, you speculate about the likely birth of new religions inspired by technology. Say a little more about that.
Yes, I think that there is a good chance that Silicon Valley and places like it will create not just gadgets and tools, but ideological systems and even religions that will make many of the traditional promises of religion, promising, justice and prosperity and even immortality, but here on earth with the help of technology, and not after you die with the help of supernatural beings. And you can say that we have actually seen at least some techno religions, religions based on technology, previously. Maybe the best example is socialism and communism. Communism promised to create paradise on earth with the help of the technology of the Industrial Revolution. And now it didn't work very well, but this was the basic idea. We don't need God, we just need to control the means of production. And the engineers and the technicians, they can create paradise on earth for us. And this didn't work very well, but I think that in the 21st century, we'll see a second wave of these techno religions. Now, if you don't like the term religion, you can just use ideology instead. But I think there is no essential difference between ideology and religion. They both fulfill the same function in history, to give legitimacy to human institutions and to human norms and values. Whether there is a God involved or not is really far less important than the historical function, because in the end, it's not God that makes religions, it's humans that make religion.
The dividing line for me, usually between religion and another kind of ideology, like a political one, is at the line between the natural and the supernatural. So when you're positing the existence of invisible agents for which you have no real evidence, or you're making claims about the validity of prophecy, the Messiah is going to return,
Mhm.
or you're making claims about the survival of consciousness after death based on precious little evidence, that's where I think it's obviously a religious enterprise and you have superstition and otherworldliness creeping in. But again, there's no very clear line there. And when you talk about something like what the personality cult in North Korea at the moment, obviously it has many of the features of a religion, certainly the socially consequential ones. And then you have something like, the singularity phenomenon, or the idea of the singularity in Silicon Valley
Mhm.
as propounded by somebody like Ray Kurzweil. That has many of the features of, otherworldliness, arguably, that a classical religion does. I mean, there is this expectation of immortality that you mentioned a few moments ago. And yeah, I agree that the boundaries here are somewhat fungible. But when you think of the birth of a technology inspired religion, is the notion of the singularity something that answers to that description already, or are you thinking about something else?
Definitely, that's probably the best example we have today. I think like the singularitarians may deserve the title, of the first Silicon Valley techno religion.
Hmm.
But as the technology matures and delivers more and more achievements and power, I think we'll see more and more of that, especially because, again, in contrast to ancient religions like Christianity or the religion of ancient Egypt, when you needed to postpone most of your desires to the afterlife, the immense attraction of the new technologies is that they promise to fulfill all these miracles here and now in this very life on earth. Now, whether they manage to do it or not, it's a different question, of course. But the temptation is, I think, immense.
The difference here, it really does strike me as a difference, is that the technology that promises this kind of rapturous fulfillment of all human desire exists to a considerable degree even now, and we are noticing it while it creates these benefits, the benefits of intelligent technology and automation, it is creating the very harms that will make people more and more desperate to find something to anchor them. Take automation as the narrow case. The consequences of automation, I think, unarguably at this point, will be a kind of relentless loss of the need for human labor, right? There are jobs that will go away that will never be replaced. And in the limit, when you get perfect automation and perfect AI, we have a total change of just the purpose of human life. I mean, people will not be able to find their meaning anymore in work because there is no need for human work. In the same way that there's virtually no need for horses to work now. And if you gave me a horse, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, if you gave me a free horse, you would just be imposing a cost on me, right? Whereas a century ago, there were, I think, 28 million horses working in the US and they were indispensable. So if you buy the fact that we are moving towards something like, in the best case, I mean, this is to be desired, and this is a matter of success. You know, if we don't destroy ourselves with technology, we will be putting ourselves out of a job. Then the challenges of wealth inequality and how to spread this wealth around and developing the political and ethical norms that will get people to want to do that, that's a huge challenge, and you'll have vast numbers of people who are looking for meaning in their lives. And, obviously that's a problem now. It's been a problem for thousands of years, but it's a problem that most people haven't had to confront very directly because the burden has been on them to spend most of their lives working. And that's something that seems to be going away. Again, if we succeed, if it doesn't go away, it means we have created some chaos for ourselves that will be intolerable for other reasons. So tell me about your views on wealth inequality here and the implications of automation and artificial intelligence for the future.
I'll speak first about inequality and then about the problem of meaning, which I think is the deepest problem. With inequality, the danger, as you say, is that automation and the rise of AI will create the most unequal society that ever existed, because more and more people will be pushed out of the job market to join a new class, the useless class, people who are not just unemployed, but unemployable. There is nothing to do with them. And we already see it in the military that already in the 20th century, the best armies recruited millions of everybody basically they could get. Today, most humans are militarily useless. There is nothing to do with them in the army. The army rely on small numbers of highly professional soldiers, these super warriors like the special elite, special forces, and increasingly on sophisticated technology like drones and then cyber warfare and things like that. And if the same thing happens in the economy, then we will have a massive new useless class. Now, people often say that new jobs will emerge to replace the old jobs, just as happened in previous waves of automation. But I think we cannot be so sure that the same thing will happen again for several reasons. First of all, humans have basically two kind of abilities we know about, physical and cognitive. And traditionally or previously in the 20th century, machines competed with us in physical abilities. So humans moved to working more and more in jobs that require cognitive abilities. But once machines compete with us also in cognitive abilities, we don't know of a third field that everybody can move to working in that. The other problem is that previously, when you had automation, so people moved from working in low skilled jobs to working in new low skilled jobs. Like if you lost your job as a farm worker in 1900, then you moved to Detroit and start working as a factory hand producing tractors or automobiles.
Mm.
And this was relatively easy because the new jobs was low skill. Then when you lost your job in the factory because of automation or because production moved to China or whatever, then you find a new job working as a cashier at Walmart. which is again a low skilled job. So it was relatively easy. But if you look to the future, what we see is that low skilled jobs, say at Walmart, will disappear. And people say, yes, but we'll have new jobs because we'll need a lot of software engineers to create virtual realities or AI or whatever. But I don't see any way in which an unemployed cashier from Walmart is suddenly becoming a software engineer in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It demands a shift from low skill to high skill, and this is just not feasible in most cases. So the potential is really for creating immense gaps between a tiny elite, which will benefit from the automation, and most people who might lose their economic and also their political power. And there are all kinds of ideas what to do about it, like universal basic income. But I
Mm.
don't think that any of the models so far created really provide an answer. I think that universal basic income is maybe a step in the right direction, but it's a half-baked idea because it doesn't really explain what universal is and what basic is.
And it opens us directly to the problem that was bundled in that question of meaning. So you have most people deriving whatever meaning they get in life, at least in significant part, from doing work they sort of enjoy.
Yeah,
So that you have to, I mean, apart from the incentive problems, I mean, we want to incentivize people insofar as incentives still matter appropriately. But in the most utopian case, if we develop the perfect labor-saving technology and just cancel any need for human drudgery going forward, and then we develop the ethical and political and economic wherewithal to share the wealth to the perfect degree, whatever that is, answering your questions about what is universal and what is basic, and then people are free to live as creatively and beautifully and organize themselves in any way that they want, you're then left with the problem of what does the average Homo sapien mind do with so much leisure? And how do you find meaning in that context? Do you see that as an easy problem to solve, or is it something that is going to give rise to new pathologies and conflicts of a sort that we can scarcely imagine?
I think it's going to be a very difficult problem and a very interesting problem. I don't think it's impossible to solve it, but it's a very serious challenge. Everything we've so far seen in history indicates that most people will not know what to do with this kind of freedom and leisure. One option that some experts point is that people will just spend more and more time in virtual reality games, three-dimensional virtual worlds, which will provide them with far more excitement and meaning than anything in the real world,
Hmm.
which is one possibility. In a way, again, it's not completely new because you can say that for thousands of years, most people found meaning in playing virtual reality games, which we just called religions. Religion is a huge virtual reality game. You invent certain rules that exist only in your imagination, like you must pray 5 times a day, you shouldn't eat pork, two men shouldn't have sex with one another, and so forth. These laws exist only in your imagination, and you go through life and you try to gain points. I mean, you pray for 5 times a day, you gain points. You have sex with another man, you lose points. If by
Hmm.
the time you die, you have enough points, then you get to the next level, supposedly. And millions of people for thousands of years have found meaning in playing this huge virtual reality game. So this could continue in a different way also in the future. I think the really deep problem with the question of meaning has to do with the structure of the human mind, that Homo sapiens is a storytelling animal. We think in stories, we expect reality to be a story, and we expect the meaning of life also to be a story. When people ask, what is the meaning of life? They almost always expect the answer to come in the shape of a story. Some huge cosmic drama with a beginning and middle and end, and heroes and villains and so forth, and very important, with a role for me to play in the drama, in the big story. And I think the problem is that reality doesn't come in the shape of a story. I think, as a kind of a rule of thumb, if the meaning of life that you think you have found is in the shape of a story, it's wrong. It's a human invention. And how to overcome that, I don't think we are anywhere near knowing the answer to that one.
It's interesting there because, and I noticed at one point in your book, you said something a little skeptical about my conception of the moral landscape, the idea that there can be right answers to questions of good and evil or right and wrong or human values. But I see it as very much of a piece with what you just expressed there, the idea that the meaning of life is not a matter of having the right story about it. And even if you get rid of all stories or admit that all stories don't have really deep roots in reality, there still is just the fact that we live in a universe where certain experiences are possible. And we are navigating in this space, and we're navigating without a map or without it or with a very primitive map. And whatever our stories and their utility, there still is a difference between excruciating and pointless misery and far more sublime and desirable states of consciousness. Again, whatever stories we tell ourselves or whether we tell ourselves any, we must navigate. We have no choice but to navigate. We keep moving toward things that are painful. And sometimes these pains lead to better things on the other side, and we're surprised that the pain had a purpose. And sometimes it's just getting worse and worse, and we know we want to move in another direction, whether individually or collectively. And so we have
Mhm.
this navigation problem. And the possibilities there that await us are absolutely the result of however reality is. And if we can integrate our minds with technology that allows us to, as you say, fudge this boundary between fiction and fact, and we can live in a kind of Aldous Huxley dystopia or utopia, depending on how you look at it, where everyone is lost in his own dream world of virtual reality or some other thing that is just the product of the human imagination, well, then we may not be at base level reality anymore, but we're still partaking of states of consciousness that are possible. And our exploration in those domains is, again, constrained by what is possible. And so I see us as navigating in this space, and things can go wonderfully right or disastrously wrong based on how it is certain experiences become possible. Do you agree with that, or is there some way in which you're not converging with me there?